Tonight, fuel prices up, mortgage rates up. What can the government do to tackle a perfect economic storm caused by the Iran conflict? The Prime Minister summons bosses from the energy, banking and insurance sectors to Downing Street as the German Chancellor warns that the economic hit from the war could be as bad as COVID. That as Sir Keir Starmer launches Labour's local election campaign, pledging to support families with the cost of living.
So many people across the country, when they see the war, particularly in Iran, they're beginning to think, how's this going to impact on me, my family, my household, and my bills going up?
Also tonight, we have a special report on how the disruption of fertiliser shipments caused by the war could lead to food shortages and higher prices on the shelves. And strike a pause as the Speaker's cat, Ali, enjoys a glossy front-page splash. We look at how pets have become part of a politician's PR arsenal. All that and more with Salma Shah and John Nicholson, who'll be with me for the next hour. It's Monday. I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Politics Hub. The Prime Minister has just summoned energy, shipping and insurance bosses to a war summit in Downing Street as the government tries to navigate the knock-on impact of the conflict in the Middle East. No one knows how this war will unfold, but amidst warnings of mortgage rate hikes and petrol prices up, the impact is already here.
It's not our war, but it is our duty to protect British citizens. Particularly their concern will be not just the escalation of the war, but this sense that it's going to hit them and their families and their households. And I think probably uppermost in their minds at the moment is energy bills, petrol, and also food prices.
Well, in private, crisis meetings and contingency plans, but in public, the message from ministers remains keep calm and carry on. We will try to make sense of it all and how worried we should really be over the next hour. But first, let's stay with the Prime Minister because he has had a busy day. A little earlier, he launched Labour's local election campaign and focused on both the wars in Ukraine and Iran and the mounting pressures on the cost of living.
So many people across the country, when they see the war, particularly in Iran, they're beginning to think, how's this going to impact on me, my family, my household, and my bills going up? And that's a perfectly understandable concern. And it's a real concern to the government that we make sure that we do what we can to support families across the country. That's why I'm really pleased that the last budget, Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor, who steadied the way on our economy, took the decision that we would reduce household energy bills. And this Wednesday, that decision comes into effect. So for households across the country who are really worried about the impact on their bills, I can be really clear today that on Wednesday, your energy bills will come down by about an average £100, just over £100, and they will stay down until the end of June. Whatever happens in the conflict in Iran. Really important we get that message across. People are very worried about this. Bills coming down this Wednesday, staying down until the end of June.
Well, political correspondent Alex Rogers is here. Alex, you've been outside Downing Street all afternoon. You know, what did we hear? Were there any announcements?
Not any new announcements at the moment. We just know that he summoned all of these key bosses, I think, as a sort of show of strength to the British public, that he is taking the war seriously and the impact that's going to have on the cost of living crisis. But he did say that it needs to be a joint effort to sort of sort out the crisis and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And he was saying we can't do this on our own. But at the moment, we don't really know what he wants these energy firms to do. It could be that he wants them to ensure that oil is moving freely throughout the world while that strait is closed. And also, we do know that they've spoken about price gouging, but it is a little bit unclear at the moment. And he's obviously facing calls from Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Tory party, to act of his own accord. You know, he can do things, she says, to help ease the burden. And I think one big dividing line is this oil and gas drilling in the North Sea. We heard from Kemi Badenoch earlier about that. Here's what she had to say.
The Prime Minister keeps having meetings. He doesn't need to have any more meetings. The oil and gas sector have said what it is that they need. And this is what Conservative policy is. Let's scrap the windfall tax. They haven't been getting a windfall. Their businesses are closing. People are investing elsewhere. Let's allow UK export finance to start, supporting clean energy oil and gas drilling that they can do elsewhere. That will also help bring in revenue. That will also help support the jobs in this sector. We need to make sure that we have a sustainable policy that is well thought through, not just something from nearly 20 years ago that doesn't work for the situation we are in today.
We're seeing quite a lot of Kemi Badenoch at the moment. This has become quite a big dividing line, hasn't it, whether we should drill or not in the North Sea?
Exactly, and Labour say it wouldn't have any impact on energy bills and there's not actually enough oil to sort of affect or boost our energy security. But I think it does provide the Conservatives and Reform, those right-wing parties, a line with which to attack net zero, which we know has become very politically difficult over recent years. So it is an ideological dividing line. I think we'll hear more and more about it.
Yeah, really interesting. Alex, stay here, but I want to bring in our panel for tonight, the former Conservative advisor, Salma Shah, and the former SNP MP, John Nicholson. Thanks both for being here. Salma, let's start with you. There's a lot going on. We've got this crisis meeting. Do you think the government are kind of aligned in terms of their public and private messaging? Because the message publicly is, keep calm, carry on.
I mean, they have to say that because the last thing you want is a repeat of a pandemic situation where you've got people going out and panic buying because they don't really understand what's coming down the track. So I absolutely understand the messaging that they have in public. I also can guarantee that behind the scenes there's going to be a lot of frantic panicking, particularly at the Treasury, in terms of what's going to happen to inflation, what's going to happen to their own balance sheets and what they can actually afford when it comes to a spending round. And it would not surprise me if there was some discussion, maybe small at this point in time, about whether there needs to be an emergency budget in reaction to this. Because even if we have a very optimistic outlook on the timeline of this conflict, the repercussions and the ramifications of it could be coming down the track for a long time. And the hit that British business is taking as a consequence of this could be pretty fundamental for a while. Emergency budget, potentially. Do you think that's what we need?
Well, possibly. Consumer confidence is very low. I think Which has just done a survey and they've shown that it's dropped almost to pandemic levels. A third of households are dipping into their savings every month to make ends meet. I've got to laugh a little bit about Kemi Badenoch there saying that drilling in the North Sea is the future and the solution. For those of us with a slightly longer political memory, you'll remember the 2014 referendum on independence. The Conservatives and Labour said that oil was about to run out. And here we are a decade and a bit later with her saying it's the future for us. I mean, I don't really also understand when she talks about clean oil and gas from the North Sea. Obviously, the future is all about renewables. We all know that. And I think you're absolutely spot on when you say that in the short term, increased drilling is not going to be the solution.
But I suppose if their argument would be if we're importing from elsewhere, may as well we be making it ourselves in the short term?
That ship has sailed. The North Sea oil is reaching its final stage, and that is not really the future. Blindingly obvious what we need to do, which is Donald Trump needs to do a deal with the Iranians. He clearly had no idea what he was getting into. He doesn't know anything about history. He doesn't know anything about the Middle East. He's created this crisis. He needs to take ownership of it. And I suspect that American political pressure as we head towards the midterms over there is going to be what brings a resolution to this.
I was just going to jump in and say, I think this speaks to something that's very fundamental. And when the immediate crisis is over, we're all going to forget about it. And this is the absolute sort of downside of government, which is we only ever respond to what is urgent.
Short-termism, they call it, don't they?
Well, yeah. Well, I like saying only responding to what is urgent. It's not as if you don't want to focus on the long-term thing.
There's a lot that's urgent.
There's just a lot that's urgent. And I think the best thing that the government can do, not the best thing, I mean, a good thing that the government could do is that they need to talk about energy security for the longer term. Now, yes, you're right. We've potentially reached peak oil. which is the phrase, in the North Sea, we are still not up to scratch in terms of being able to take renewables onto the grid, and we don't know where our gas extraction policy is either. But we know that as a consequence of this action and conflict in the Middle East, the world is going to be much more unstable. And if that is the case, then there has to be some kind of serious commission, cross-party, whatever it is, to work out how you get that energy security for the medium term at the very least.
OK, thank you. Let's just bring Alex back in, because tomorrow we are expecting more a COBRA meeting, potentially. Just give us a brief outlook at what's happening.
We're just, another COBRA meeting. There was one a couple of weeks ago, convening all cabinet ministers. So clear with the meeting today and the meeting tomorrow, this really is something that the Prime Minister wants to focus on, and it suggests that the government is aware that it might have to do more to protect people as the months go on.
Yeah, OK. Alex and our panel, we will come back to you. Thank you very much. Well, someone who can help us unpick what is going on with fuel prices here in the UK is our data and economics editor, Ed Conway. Let's have a look at what he's found out.
Now, if you've been to one of these recently, to your local petrol station, you've probably noticed two things. First of all, petrol prices have gone up a lot. Secondly, diesel prices seem to be going up much faster than petrol prices, raising the question, why is that? Well, first of all, you're right. Look, this is petrol prices just recently. They have gone up pretty sharply. But look at diesel. We're going back a few years here. Look at diesel prices. They are up even more sharply. So diesel's up 28%, petrol up 15%. So it's basically double the speed of the increase. This story is kind of a slightly long-winded story, but it kind of begins in a way with this man, Gordon Brown, when he was Chancellor, and a policy he announced to basically encourage people to buy diesel cars. It was kind of a tax break in 2002. But also this, the refineries in the UK and the fact that quite a lot of them have shut down. So those two things together, on top of the war, help explain what's going on right now. So first to Gordon Brown. So a few years ago, kind of back at the turn of the millennium, the vast majority of cars that people were buying were petrol cars. Then Gordon Brown brought in these tax changes that basically encouraged people to buy diesel cars. Everyone thought they were better for the environment. And then look what happens. The red line is diesel. Diesel kind of car purchases went up and up and up, actually to be higher than petrol by about 2015. Then everyone realised, oh, it turns out actually maybe diesel cars aren't quite so good for the environment. Dieselgate happened, and then you can see the diesel line went down. But the key thing about this is, as a result of that, there are quite a lot of diesel cars in the UK, partly because of tax policy going back years and years and years. We were encouraged to buy them. And the other thing to note is, well, we've got all these refineries in the UK, but most of them are designed primarily to make petrol. So they take crude oil and turn it into petrol. And also, they've been starting to shut down. So even last year, that was refineries a few years ago. Last year, Grangemouth and Lindsey refineries shut down. So now we only have 4 of them left. And you put those two things together and look at how much petrol we're making versus how much we need. Basically, the line, anything above the line shows we're making more than 100% of what we need domestically. Petrol, we are kind of self-sufficient, technically self-sufficient. You know, we do bring in a fair bit and export a fair bit, but self-sufficient for petrol. But for diesel, we used to be. But then, look, fewer refineries, more demand, and that line went down. That's the key point. We're dependent on imports for diesel. This is where we used to get our imports from, most of them from Russia. Obviously, that's changed with sanctions coming in. But now, most of it comes from the US. But the key thing to note is this. Look, if we look at the breakdown of where we're getting diesel from, 12% of it comes from the Gulf. That's a problem now, obviously. You've got countries like Belgium and the Netherlands, their refineries there, they're dependent on the Gulf as well. They're taking the oil from the Gulf and refining it. And then you've got somewhere like India, which is actually getting a lot of oil from Russia. So you see, kind of 60%, actually more than 60% of these areas that we typically get diesel from are affected by what's going on right now, affected by geopolitics. So put all of that together and it helps explain why it's really tight for all fuels at the moment, but particularly for diesel.
Well, Ed Conway there. A little earlier, I spoke to the Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander.
We're absolutely determined to put the interests of the British people first. That's why after launching the local election campaign today in Wolverhampton, the Prime Minister hot-footed it straight back down to Downing Street to chair an important roundtable with leaders of industry, companies, such as Shell and BP, the large shipping company, Maersk, also the insurance company, Lloyd's of London and other financial companies, as well as representatives from the military to talk about the conflict in the Middle East and make sure that we're doing everything we can, working with international partners as well as business to shield the British people from the impact of the conflict. That's why it's good news, obviously, that we've got the energy price cap coming down on Wednesday. So that will mean money off people's energy bills over the next 3 months.
Sorry, the only thing that has actually been confirmed is that £50 million for people on heating oil. Beyond that, there is actually nothing specific that has been announced since the war in Iran.
Well, obviously, we were well placed to deal with this crisis because of the decision that the Chancellor took at the budget to reduce the energy price cap, and that's why bills will be coming down by £100, and that support is going to be in place for the next 3 months. We've taken wider support to act on the cost of living as well, wider action there. So if you look at, for example, the rail fares freeze that came in this month, which will, help people who are reliant upon the train to get to work.
But none of this is actually in. Sorry, just to be clear, that none of this is actually in response to the conflict in Iran. Obviously, the Prime Minister is meeting energy bosses in Downing Street today. Do you have a sense of what else might be announced?
So, look, clearly we've got the important thing happening on Wednesday, which is the energy price cap coming down, and that's going to be, the price cap's coming down by £117, and that's in place through until the summer. We don't know how long this conflict is going to last. The Chancellor has been very clear that we will keep everything under review. People in the past have experienced governments abandoning them in moments of crisis, and that's not what this Labour government is going to do. And so, that is why when we launched the election campaign today, we were clear that the number one priority was about providing support to people on the cost of living. I've mentioned rail fares, we've got energy bills, prescription.
Hold on, but the Conservatives introduced furlough during COVID and their bailout during Ukraine.
If you listen to what Jeremy Hunt said about the support package that he put in place in response to the war in Ukraine, he's actually welcomed the fact that the Chancellor is considering a targeted package of support. Now, we're going to take those decisions at the appropriate point in time when we've got more clarity about the way in which this conflict is playing out. But both Jeremy Hunt, the former Conservative Chancellor, as well as Rachel Reeves, has been clear that if you put in a massive package of support,
but you've accused other parties of sorry, I know it's difficult when it's down the line, but you've accused other parties of abandoning people in the past.
Look, I don't think that the British people feel that the governments of historically have necessarily always been on their side through the cost of living crisis. That's why the Chancellor made it her number one objective in the budget last year. It's why it's been good news.
But people want to actually. You can say that, but people actually want to know what to expect. But sorry, can I move on? Because I know that you're obviously the Transport Secretary, which is really significant because some of the big warnings about fuel and jet fuel. Should people be worried about that?
As you would expect, my department and the government have been in close contact with both the airlines, the jet fuel suppliers and the airports, and there is no imminent threat to supplies in terms of jet fuel. Now, you would expect any responsible government to be planning for all contingencies, and so that's why we're working very closely with industry to understand what their future planning looks like around jet fuel supplies, and we will continue to do that in the days and weeks to come.
When Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor in Germany, says that this could be as bad as COVID, do you agree with that?
Nobody knows at the moment how long this conflict is going to last, and that's why the number one priority has to be to de-escalate the situation. It's also right. It's also why I think it was right that the Prime Minister took the decision not to be involved in offensive action, and why he's been clear that we're not going to get dragged in to that wider conflict, and they need to take defensive action that protects the interests of British citizens in the region and our allies.
The reason I'm asking the question is because, we've seen in Australia they're halving fuel duty. We've seen those comments from the German Chancellor. We've seen reaction from around the world, and it sort of feels like the messaging so far from the government in public has been keep calm and carry on, whereas in private we're seeing these crisis meetings, contingency plans being made. you know, what is it that those other countries know that we don't, and should the government being a bit more straight with people?
Look, I think the Prime Minister acted quickly on the whole issue of heating oil because individuals were buying fuel on almost a day-by-day basis. And so that was where the impact was felt first. And that's why he put that £53 million package of support in very quickly. And vulnerable households will be able to access that through their local councils. Obviously, every country will be different, and not every country will have been in the position where in the last budget they took the decision to reduce their equivalent of the energy price cap by £117, which is the decision that this government has taken. And that's why that protects people for the next 3 months. And we've said that we will keep the situation under review.
And just to confirm, discussions are happening, you just suggested, and other ministers have suggested, around fuel duty and what happens in September.
So this government has stopped fuel duty from rising with inflation this year. We've maintained the 5p cut.
But the cap is due to lift in September.
So what the Chancellor has said is that we will continue to monitor this situation, keep it under review. We know that when people are filling up their cars, they will be looking at the price per litre. And so, we've said that we're going to stand by the British people through this crisis, and we will do that.
OK, let's bring Salma and John in. John, are the government going to get blamed for this, and is that fair?
Well, obviously, the government is not responsible for the crisis in the Middle East. It'd be ridiculous to say that they were, but it will have huge knock-on consequences because everybody at the moment thinks, it's going to be about the price of fuel when I go to fill up my car, but it's going to be much more than that, isn't it? We already know it's harder this month to get mortgages than it was last month. I know myself, I'm applying for a mortgage. It's the mortgage broker says it's tough out there in the mortgage market for all the people who are trying to renew at the moment. And then food prices, of course, transporting foodstuffs across the world, that's going to be a knock-on effect as well. But as I said previously, clearly the solution lies with the President of the United States settling this conflict. And I really do think, I used to work in American politics, I can only begin to imagine the amount of pressure that the White House is under from all the candidates standing in the midterms as they see this crisis developing. The President has to act.
And Salma, the Tories, on the question of blame, the Tories got blamed, didn't they, for the pandemic and what happened in Ukraine? Obviously, there were other things going on as well.
Dancing.
But they got blamed for that. Is that what's going to happen now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, when you're in power and when you're in government, inevitably, because the choices sit with you, if those choices aren't good ones, then you will be blamed, and rightly so. And I think this is actually a good lesson for today's government, is to consider what is their long-term, medium-term impact of the decisions that they're making today. And there are things that they can work out now, that Treasury can model right now. So, it's great that the Prime Minister had lots of businesses around to be able to share their experiences and tell him what's going on directly. But what are they then going to do with that information that's going to have an impact? And I understand that they probably, if they are planning on cutting the escalator or freezing fuel duty, they probably can't say that right now because of market sensitivities. But there has to be some kind of understanding that there is some kind of package that's going to come together. Even if they do that, it's still going to cost the taxpayer ultimately, because in order to find that money, they're probably going to have to borrow or they're going to have to make cuts. So it's not as if they can just magic money and a support package out of nowhere. And this is the thing that the Tories know all too well during the pandemic. Furlough costs money. All that assistance that the government put in, it's not this magic money that exists without, it's taxpayers' money. So we have to remember that these are the balances that we've got to consider today.
And the question is, how will the voters respond as the country goes to the polls? Will they, you asked exactly the right question, will the voters blame the government? Keir Starmer's leadership was already on a sugary peg.
Well, I have to say, the fact that he has distanced himself from the White House on this probably has helped him a lot in political terms around this, so he's not trying to exacerbate. But if he's trying to bring a solution to the Iran conflict that's going to end this, Where is the activity on that side as well? Because right now it just seems like America, Israel is going in, our bases are being attacked, but we don't seem to have a plan to either counter or offer a diplomatic solution.
Yeah, there could not be a worse time for the United Kingdom to be isolated from our closest allies in Europe because of Brexit.
I knew you were going to make this a European point.
Well, it's true, isn't it? Because of Brexit, this is where we need solidarity.
But the Europeans are in the same position that we are. I think that's the issue. So it's like that whole thing that Starmer tried to do with sort of trying to win over the White House, that is what he needs to lean into now if he's going to have any diplomatic presence.
And there is more positive noises on Europe from the Prime Minister. We will come back to you because there's so much to talk about. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, I'll be speaking to the former Foreign Office Minister and oil trader, Sir Alan Duncan, and hearing why he thinks the impact of the war will be catastrophic.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Rich and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Well, earlier I spoke to the former Foreign Office Minister, Sir Alan Duncan, who worked as an oil trader before entering politics. To start with, I just was interested to hear your view broadly on the state of the oil markets at the moment, because it feels like they're at the mercy of Donald Trump's tweets to an extent.
To some extent. I mean, firstly, this is the inevitable consequence of what is an utterly unnecessary conflict. And also, it may be just only the beginning. It is absolutely inevitable that you'll see a dramatic increase in oil prices, which, of course, then affects fertilizers and everything else as well, if you close the Strait of Hormuz. But if Donald Trump puts ground troops, for instance, on Kharg Island, which is the main export terminal for Iran, not only is that an escalation and it's going to be catastrophic, but the Iranians will do two things. First, they'll just cut off that supply of oil, which adds to the problem, and they will chuck missiles to more, I think, vulnerable targets in the Gulf. And they will invoke the Houthis more in Yemen. And if you then close the Bab al-Mandab, which is the Red Sea pinch point, you absolutely, dramatically increase the pain that all of us are suffering. You've got rationing in Bangladesh, you've got rationing in Sri Lanka, rationing in the Philippines, you've got massive food problems growing in, or brewing in India. This is a catastrophe of, I would argue, primarily the Israelis' making.
And in terms of, actually getting things through the Strait, what are our options? Do you think it has to be a military option?
Well, the idea that you can actually land troops on Iran and somehow open up a waterway is utterly illogical. No, there is not a military option, because what's different from the Iraq War is that the threats are asymmetric. You can have little skiff boats, which mini little motor torpedo boats with a little gun at the front or something, or low-level drones, which are very threatening to shipping. The ships then become uninsurable. Therefore, the oil will not flow. So the idea that you can somehow stop these risks militarily is, I think, pretty fanciful. Perhaps with an enormous navy, a massive deployment of weaponry may be, but I don't see that. So I think this is only going to get worse unless the conflict stops.
As a former oil trader, what do you think traders are thinking? What is in their mind when they look at the current oil market?
Well, I think they're in despair about politicians, because this could have been prevented. I mean, there was a deal on the table. The Omanis had negotiated a complete denuclearization of Iran. And my reading of this is that as soon as Netanyahu heard that was on the table, he deliberately started this war, because it's the war he's always wanted. He's always wanted to zap Iran. And I think the advice he gave to the States, that somehow this could be quick and you can have a change of regime quite easily, was utter nonsense.
But in terms of sort of seeing this, what's in the mind of oil and gas companies and traders?
I think they see this as a growing catastrophe, because it's not just oil, it's all of the other supply chains for many, many other products, which will cause difficulty throughout the world. I mean, this is massive. Now, today, of course, we've got Keir Starmer meeting, fuel suppliers in the UK. Oh, he's got to do it. But that's just petrol. Petrol actually isn't suffering as much as diesel, and it's all the other supply chain things which are going to cause a lot more political difficulty later. And the idea that you can somehow mitigate all these price increases in a nationwide way when you've got this external global threat is, I think, unrealistic.
How do you think Keir Starmer's handled it so far?
I think he's done very well, actually. I mean, it's always difficult to handle Trump because you never know which way he's going to go. But I think his resistance at the beginning to participating in it, and I think I heard him today say, this is not our war. On that, I would say he's absolutely right. And frankly, he's in a much better position than the likes of Reform or the Conservative Party, who appear to say that Israel can do no wrong. Well, that's going to cost them.
And in terms of his managing of the relationship with Donald Trump, you mentioned, how would you describe the state of the special relationship at the moment?
I don't think we've had a special relationship with Trump at all. He's only got one special relationship, and that's with Israel. We have a significant relationship and a deep historic one, for which I think the royal visit can only be helpful. But of course it's going to be scratchy, because we think that he's doing some very bad things. And I think this is the worst of the things he's done. But if you look at it, I think a number of things are changing, which may mean that just having been a little bit scratchy will stand us in good stead, because, firstly, that's where Europe is. That's where increasingly the Gulf now are. The Gulf don't know if they're more angry with Trump and Netanyahu or with Iran. And also, in his own base, as he approaches the midterms, the MAGA support is very split on the whole issue, not just of foreign intervention, but also of support for Israel. So his own sort of previously certain base is now, I think, in some turmoil. So
should we be standing up to Donald Trump more?
I think he's got the calibration about right. I mean, it's quite clear that we do not support this war. It's quite clear that I think we thought there was almost no thought behind the decision to do it. I mean, I've never known such a serious conflict which has had such a lightweight political justification for it happening. And really, it really is a tragedy and an historic disgrace.
OK, let's bring our panel, Salma and John, back in, shall we? Salma, this is your old boss.
My former boss. I worked for him when he was when we were all in opposition together before David Cameron became Prime Minister.
And
did he have a nickname by any chance?
Yes, he was known as Hunky Dunky because of his suave good looks.
Well, that was a while ago. Let's talk about...
Oh, that's a bit harsh.
No, that came out wrong. That came out wrong. No, let's focus on Iran. Right, so he seems happy with how the Prime Minister's doing.
I think in terms of, as he said, I couldn't put it better myself, the calibration is about right. But I do think that ultimately the Iranians do view us as part of the problem anyway. So the fact that our bases have been hit means that we're not sort of fundamentally out of this war. And that is one point of view, whereas with other people, they think we're here whether we like it or not, and we are going to remain targets. And it's not as if we are going to be looked at to find that diplomatic solution to this conflict. So I think he's right. The calibration is about right, but it could change at any point given what the Iranians may do in the Gulf to UK assets and given what Trump or Israel might do in the coming weeks.
John, what did you make of Sir Alan?
I found myself largely in agreement, and I think he's absolutely spot on to identify the conflict within the MAGA movement. And it's really fascinating because it's hard to remember this now, but what Trump did was he campaigned against constant wars. That was one of his themes. The United States must stop getting itself into wars. And here he is with this totally ill-considered war that he's embarked upon. Donald Trump famously doesn't read. He doesn't study history. He didn't understand Iran. He thought that the decapitation strategy on the leadership would work. He didn't understand the complexity of the Iranian leadership. And he's now talking about sending in troops, or at least he's sending troops to the region. This will infuriate many in the MAGA movement who believed him when he said that he would stop foreign wars. And this is the man who keeps complaining that he hasn't had the Nobel Peace Prize. You've got to laugh, really, given what he's been doing.
There's something that Sir Alan said on that interview that I think is worth just repeating and understanding about the nature of this conflict. And he talked about the principle of asymmetry in this war. Now, we've seen this successfully deployed in Ukraine with drone attacks. So how do you challenge a much bigger, mightier army that has a bigger arsenal of weapons and missiles? And we're seeing this in the Straits of Hormuz, that if you do send in ground forces, that doesn't necessarily achieve what you want in terms of opening the water, because they are tactically more nubile and dynamic than they have ever been because of these small little technologies that we can use. So we can talk about, a big army going in to open the Straits of Hormuz or other countries being involved, but it doesn't necessarily deal with the problem. And I think it's really important that your viewers understand that, because it's the context in which we could potentially be fighting it.
Really
interesting to Ukraine and its involvement. No, that's all I was going to say. Ukraine, its involvement using its technology might also have a knock-on consequence for the Americans' attitude towards them.
Very true. Thank you both. We will come back to you. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. Food producers warn of rising prices as essential supplies are constrained by the war.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom!
Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching. Tonight on The Wrap, we will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why. He did know what he was doing. Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
Prices, as I'm sure you've noticed, are rising across the board, but some more quickly than others. The first thing that you might be noticing is a rise in petrol costs, but there are warnings too from food producers and farmers that the conflict is impacting supply, and their prices will rise too. They've been speaking to our business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelso.
Come on, up you get. This spring, the most sought-after commodity in agriculture isn't sunshine or rain. It's in these tanks. The start of the growing season brings a steady stream of tankers to Brineslow's Great Yarmouth terminal. They're loading liquid nitrogen to spray on crops across the country. Thanks to the war, they may be spreading food inflation too.
In these tanks is liquid fertiliser. It's come from natural gas, turned into ammonia, and from ammonia into nitric acid and urea.
Fertiliser prices have risen because it's an energy product. The price of natural gas has skyrocketed, and Gulf production, normally a third of global supply, is stranded.
It's a really serious situation. In some respects, it's worse than it was 4 years ago in the Ukrainian situation. And we all know what happened 6 months later. There was 10% inflation, and that knocked the government right back.
Those white sacks are full of urea. It's a crucial ingredient in fertiliser. Since the war began, each 1 tonne bag has almost doubled in value from around $300 to more than $600. And it's happened at precisely the worst moment. In Britain and across Europe, it is the growing season. Lovely spring day.
Gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah. 150 miles west in the Cotswolds, beef farmer David Barton is already counting the cost. It's peak calving season and his heifers are enjoying the last of the winter feed stock.
Traditionally, livestock farmers tend to buy it in the spring. That had gone from about £370 a tonne for the compound that I buy to £479. I ordered it, I got a price on a day, I ordered it in that afternoon. The following day, I was told it's gone up £20 a tonne.
And what difference will the fertiliser make to the kind of yield?
Oh, if I didn't put any on, it would be half the yield.
It's about 70 miles.
70 miles of tomatoes. That's incredible. In the glasshouses of the Lee Valley, north of London, the first crop of sweet peppers will be picked this week. The cherry tomatoes will follow in mid-April. An early summer made possible only by gas-fired heating and fertiliser.
The price of that gas has gone up 92% in 4 weeks, which is absolutely staggering.
If the prices stay where they are?
Disaster. And that is not only for this organisation, but every organisation that's involved in producing food.
For now, farmers and growers are bearing the brunt of the energy price spike, their narrow margins squeezed even tighter. If the war continues, by the time this summer's crops are harvested, consumers will be counting the cost too.
Right, let's bring Salma and John back in, shall we? I mean, Salma, you know, people are really going to you feel fuel first, but there is a lot coming down the track potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could have put out a better package than that from Paul Kelso to really talk about the supply chain impact of this. It's not just that food's going to go up, you know, when you go to the supermarket and pick, you know, your usual items up off the shelf. It's that everything in the supply chain is impacted by this. And then I suppose the sort of natural result of that and the question of that is, what can the government do around this? And the answer is very little, unless they start making choices about, you know, what they're going to support or what they might subsidise and what's going to be critical. And certainly food production in that sense might be. So there may be a plan from a very important department, DEFRA, to start thinking about food security provisions as well. And I wonder if that's going to be part of, you know, some of the COBRA meetings or some of the bigger meetings we're having.
And very difficult to know what consumers can do about these price rises, really, because, you know, I was reading earlier today, and it's always interesting when you go on these websites, consumer advice, I always like looking at which is advice. And normally it's full of good common sense information, but they're really struggling, the consumer journalists, to tell people what they can do. I mean, what do you do if you're a family and these prices are going up? There's only an extent to which you can economise or choose different type of products. Ultimately, when products across the range are going up in price, it really will hit the average family and have a knock-on consequence, possibly, for politicians as they face elections.
Yeah, you can cut fuel duty, but you can't cut food prices, can you? And obviously people, you know, just coming off a period of high inflation as well, it does feel never-ending.
Yeah, and there's only so much. I mean, you know, you could imagine the Prime Minister sort of trying to talk to retailers, you know, having spoken to, you know, energy companies today. But the retailers are going to be facing the same pressures that everybody's facing, is that their margin and their profit is going to be cut immeasurably when this comes down the track. So they are going, some of these costs are going to have to pass on to the consumer. So whether there are meal deals, other packaging, other ways of buying some of this supply, I think all of that is now in play.
And they've talked about targeted support, but, you know, they're going to have to draw the line somewhere. What do you think of that?
Well, exactly, they are. And my heart goes out, really, to the food producers in my former constituency. I knew, talking to them, just how hard it is to keep the prices down, to help consumers. And this is the third great shock they've had in a small number of years. First of all, they had the disaster of Brexit. Then they had COVID immediately afterwards. And now they've got this, and they must be thinking, what can possibly hit us next that is going to detrimentally affect our industry? And
just to put it in context,
it's a worrying time.
Tesco did make a pre-tax profit of 2.2 billion.
I don't think either of us are talking about the great big supermarket chains, are we? We're talking about small producers.
I'm just kind of trying to give some broader context.
But the small producers do supply those supermarkets, and those supermarkets are going to make profit. They're going to pay tax on it. There are other things that will come out in terms of, you know, their numbers of what they actually have in terms of free cash flow. They will be paying investors. They may have institutional investors, like paying pension funds. So I don't think that number captures exactly what's happening on the business side either. So I think we have to be really careful that we don't try and villainise any particular sector here. Although I do think that they're small producers, and when you think about it, when you think about all the kind of like political issues around the family farm tax, for example, that sort of issue will really come home to roost, because they are the people that we may be depending on for our food supply and production.
But I think you make a good point, though, about the profits. And small producers, of course, get regularly squeezed by these big companies. You only have to talk to dairy farmers, for example, who will tell you just how tough it is to deal with some of the big supermarket chains. They are selling their milk on at a healthy profit, but it's the local producers, the dairy farmers, they're the ones who really get squeezed.
Yeah. OK, thank you both. We will come back to you. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. As the Speaker's cat gets the front page of a glossy magazine, we take a look at Parliament's top dogs.
Mr. Hexton, does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve?
Did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions.
David Cameron says that you should vote through funding for Ukraine. What do you say to that?
I really don't care what David Cameron has to say.
When you said you were from Sky News, I just got very excited.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody? I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Now, politics can be an arduous environment, prowling the corridors of power, working around the clock in the spotlight and keeping the social channels flowing. But now one star member of the House of Commons has had their just reward, a cover feature on country life. And Attlee, this is the Speaker's cat, is taking it all in his languid stride, thanking the photographer Mark Williamson for capturing my best side, although let's be honest, they're all my best side. Those are his words, not mine. He also got glowing assessment of his performance from his owner.
Attlee's a fantastic cat, isn't he? He's everybody's friend. He's more popular than I could ever be. I'm in awe of this cat. This cat is something very special. You know, I'm just in the shadows of what Attlee does. You know, he's friendly, but other cats take offence to him. I think it's his fame that's their problem. Attlee's here to give peace and calm, and that's what he brings wherever he goes. He really does suit this palace.
But as we're all aware, Attlee has some competition for the title of top cat or maybe top dog. Let's take a look at some. Now, Larry, the official Downing Street chief mouser, has more than 888,000 followers on X and has made cameo appearances on many a TV screen. Notably, you might remember when Donald Trump came to the UK for that state visit. There he is. The current Prime Minister submitted his children's request to get another pet, unveiling Prince in 2024. Then Chancellor Rishi Sunak announced the arrival of Nova, there she is, in Downing Street in 2021, and the family dog rapidly began featuring on his socials, including when Nova stopped the PM from exercising. The Sunak family were also reminded of the rules by police after their dog was filmed without a lead in London's Hyde Park. But among the more notorious recent residents of Downing Street, Boris Johnson's dog Dylan, the stray, was at the centre of political controversy with claims that Boris Johnson didn't like the dog, and his romantic urges were even mentioned on an official Prime Minister's visit.
The dog? Do you have to worry about his romantic urges?
No, not so much. No. Not yet. No, we've not come to that issue yet, have we?
No, well, my dog is endless. He's on people's legs.
Oh dear.
Right, let's bring Salma and John back in, shall we? I think you've been warned about this. Why do politicians have pets in this environment? I think, it does help with your popularity, maybe. Everyone loves a pet.
Well, it's a personality substitute, isn't it? if you're a very, very dull politician, you hope that people might just like you better if you've got an animal. Boris Johnson being a prime example, and the dog took him for a run.
Any opportunity for a political point,
the
John?
dog took him for a run there. As for Trump, Trump's got an interesting claim to fame. Trump is the first American president since 1860 not to have a pet.
Is that right?
Does that say about him? Doesn't that say a lot about him? I mean, he likes to talk about...
And you've got some cats, I believe.
I do. I've got two cats. There's one.
Was that part of your desire to be more personable?
Yes, because I'm a kind of dry person, really, and so I just
really.
This is Carlito. They're both little strays that I got from the Cats Protection people. I'm afraid he terrorises Grace. He's turned out that he was a tiny little kitten. He's a Maine Coon now, and he's absolutely enormous and jumps on top of her and
Salma
terrifies her.
Sorry, we're getting Salma. Do you have any pets?
I don't. My children would love a dog, and as would I, but we can't. Our place is too small to have a dog, and I think it's very cool to do that. But I have to say...
Do you have experience with political pets?
No, I never came across Larry. I mean, can I just be totally honest here, though? The reason there are cats in government and in Parliament is very simply because there are so many mice.
Yep.
And I think we've got to remember that they are working animals, and I would like to understand their contracts just to make sure that actually all this publicity that they're being given is well within the PR rules.
We passed the gift shop in Parliament today. And look at all this. This is all Attlee, the Speaker's
There's
hat.
Attlee merch.
And in fact, should we give them to you as you're leaving gifts?
No, I want that one. I don't want the tea towel. That would be my cat.
Right. I've been expecting you.
That is it from us. We are back tomorrow, 7 o'clock.